So I was doing a little bit of research here because, when we got into the rebirth into the modern day, into the fun stuff conversation, the question is like, where does the SV650 go from here? It's been around for 25 years. What happens next? And I did find some photographs. Zach, I just sent you one over on the old Messenger.
Yeah.
So there are rumors that Martin, again, remember Martin has a 2003 SV650 who said the only thing he could find that it doesn't do well is off-roading and long highway runs. Apparently, there's a mock-up of a 2025 Suzuki SV650 Scrambler or SV650 Trail Edition,
right,
which it looks like they might be building a dual sport-esque adventure bike Scrambler-esque SV650 platform for 25.
I gotta say, I think it would be great.
I think it'd be kind of cool.
I think it'd be great. And here's why. I'll tell you, I'll use some logic.
We'll put the picture up on the screen.
Sure. We'll put the picture up on the screen. And, how true this is doesn't make a difference. Here's my logic. The Yamaha MT-07 shares that parallel twin with the Yamaha Tenere 700, which is the adventure bike. And the Yamaha Tenere 700 is not perfect, but it is terrific. I think you agree, Spurge. Many people agree. Yep. Excellent bike. That Honda SCL 500 I was just talking about, which shares an engine with a Honda naked bike and sport bike, and the Honda Rebel 500. That's an engine that Honda uses all over the place. And the little scramblerized version of that, the little 500cc parallel twin with a flat seat and a flat handlebar, and is a sweet bike. It's not an off-road machine, but it's a sweet bike. And I think that this style of engine does lend itself to fun in that capacity, whether it's a scrambler or an adventure bike or something like that. I think as you talked about earlier on of the SV, when people rode it way back when they first tried the first gen or second gen SV, it does a lot of things really well. The engine, yep. It sounds good and it's pleasant to use and it's fun. It's got good diversity of power. So I think that's got a lot of potential, and I hope that Suzuki's got the stones to do something like that. I
do as well.
We should call out while I'm ranting.
Yes.
That there have been a couple other there was the SV650X. Do you remember that? The Cafe Racer version that had the brown seat and the lower handlebar. I struggle to even say that it was a half-hearted attempt at the Cafe Racer. It was sort of a 1/8 hearted attempt from Suzuki. It was not a super, I don't think a super dynamic attempt to make the bike different, but it was a little something different, and it showed that Suzuki was dabbling with mods to the basic platform.
But when you start, because part of this was we were talking about mods, and that I think will round us out here. But if you Google popular SV650 mods, I was actually surprised to see the amount of people that were putting scrambler parts on them and
right.
turning them into cafe scrambler looking things.
Right.
I mean, it seems like there's a whole subculture out there of people doing that with SV650s that I was not aware of until I started researching for this episode. So,
and
more power.
And that kind of makes sense, right? That aesthetic is very popular now. And the bike remains popular. So it makes sense that people would merge those things, just like way back when people, learned and developed the idea of putting a GSXR 750 front end on, SV650. This is a very popular mod. People had taken a GSXR sport bike.
Hang on. Let me ask this in the form of a question.
Yes.
Zach, if you had to pick the most popular modification
Thank you.
that has ever occurred with an SV650, what do you think, just going on your knowledge in your own head, what do you think the most popular mod for an SV650 would be?
Probably a windscreen. But I know what you're asking, Spurge, and I'll pivot.
What do you think the most expensive mod for an SV650 would be?
Suzuki's GSXR sport bike line, if you're not familiar, is a hugely popular and long running bloodline of sport bikes that started in the mid 80s with Suzuki, and they have had many different models of GSXR 600, 750, and 1000, even 1300, whatever. Maybe we'll cover that at some point on Icon, Spurge. The point is, those bikes are more purposeful and a little bit more heavily built for sport riding. And at some point, the motorcycling community realized that with a fairly simple, I think it's like is it a bearing race or like there's a piece of the headstock where the fork connects to the frame that has to be modified slightly.
Yep.
But you can basically put a better equipped Suzuki GSXR front end onto an SV650. And with that, you get more advanced and stiffer suspension, and you get better brakes, and you get practically the same wheel size and tire size. So it's sort of like a very, very popular thing to do to make an SV650 sportier and more capable.
It's funny because I think it's become such a popular so if you're out there and you've never had to change your wheel bearings or your steering head stem bearings, you probably don't, or you're probably not familiar with the company All Balls. But All Balls is a very popular bearing company for motorcycling. And this is such a popular modification that All Balls actually makes a bearing conversion kit, I believe. And it gives you everything you need to just put a Gixxer front end onto an SV650, to Zach's point, automatically improve your front suspension and your brakes. And that's probably, when I think of mods for an SV650, I'd be hard pressed to think of anything that's probably more of a popular mod for that bike.
And I think that brings me to to a frustration that I have with Suzuki here, because in many ways, and we'll circle back to this, but in many ways, I think that the current SV650 in its late model form right now is just perfect. I love it. But in some ways, I think, gosh, there's still some pretty obvious steps that Suzuki could take, right? Like, it couldn't be that hard for Suzuki Motor Corporation to get its hands on some All Balls conversion kits and just sell an SV650 SP or so. I don't know, or even just like evolve
are you
the
afraid
SV650 I
mean, then the price
I know what you're going to say. It's going to get more. Yeah, I guess. But like, how high could the price go for putting a Gixxer 750 front end on it?
Probably somewhere around $19.99, according to inflation increases.
Oh yeah, $10,700.
So
maybe you're right.
10.5.
And so that's one of the reasons that I'm inclined to say that it's perfect. But I also, the Suzuki SV650 in late model form has, I believe, if not literally, practically the same brake calipers, like single or two piston sliding pin basic Nissan brake calipers that it had in 1999. And like, I just don't know that, considering how prevalent and important and beloved and like stalwart the Suzuki SV650 is, that it doesn't deserve a little bit of evolution there, right?
Maybe
I don't know.
Like modding them. Maybe you buy it, and I think that's the beauty of it. Like, you're talking about, well, why doesn't Suzuki do this? And then all of a sudden the price jumps up, versus you can go buy a used SV650. If you're Ian and you're lucky, you find one that someone is selling is not running for $1,000. You buy a wrecked Gixxer front end for, $1,000 off of eBay. You get a $25 All Balls conversion kit, and for $2,000 you got yourself a pretty cool track bike or amazing street bike. So like, I think, yeah, would it be cool to have Suzuki, put a little R&D into this? Absolutely. I'm not going to disagree with you there, but I think for the average person looking at this bike, you can pick one up used for pretty darn affordable, and that will leave some money left over in your pocket to pick and choose which mods you want. Because honestly, man, like, if you're riding on the street and you're not planning on doing a track day, you're going to be just fine without a Gixxer front end and the extra brakes and the extra suspension.
You're right.